Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I wanted to make a quick video kind of just showcasing the absolute potential of Blizzard Sorcerer, which is by far Sorcerer's highest damaging build in the game right now. When you go out of your way to set it up for boss DPS, the damage is ridiculous. Like I said, it does about 50 million DPS, but it can actually do much higher than that. I believe Uber Duriel has 200 million HP in a 4-man, and we killed him in just 3 seconds here, which would be about 66 million DPS, but your damage can vary. You can actually kill it even faster than this. You can kill it in about 2 seconds if you get really lucky and you play perfectly. So I kind of just wanted to make a video to show you guys how to set this up if you want to just absolutely nuke bosses, and to just show you how insane Blizzard Sorcerer is in terms of just raw boss DPS when you go out of your way to set it up for that. I also have been messing around with like a speedrun Blizzard build, which I figured I would just throw in here as well for you guys. If you don't know much about Blizzard, I'd highly recommend checking out my previous video, which I just go over kind of like a standard variation of the build that is very good for bosses and also very good for tier 100s. In this video, I'm kind of just going to go over the specialized versions of two different versions of Blizzard, one being a speedrun build, which you're seeing in the gameplay right now, and another one just being the boss damage build. Before I get into things, I want to show you guys actually why Raid Shadow Legends is way different than you think it is. A common misconception is that because it is a mobile game, there isn't really much depth or strategy to it, but I was actually pleasantly surprised when I gave the game more of a chance and started looking into all the different synergies across the massive list of over 800 completely unique heroes. With billions of different ways to customize and perfect your heroes, I'm always tinkering around with them, and it's a ton of fun to optimize around that. There's also a lot of different content to sink your teeth into within Raid, such as epic boss battles, PvP, clan wars, a campaign, the Doom Tower, and even more. I'm always swapping around my guys based on the situation and which characters synergize best with each other, and there's just an endless amount of things to do in Raid, some of which is really challenging, which is a lot of fun. One of the newest and biggest additions is the Cursed City, with 100 stages to complete, each giving you a unique challenge to conquer, with some of the stages even having 2 bosses that you need to beat at the same time. If you overcome the challenge, you can even get your hands on a mythical champion. Raid is also much less time consuming than a lot of people make it out to be, due to there being an auto battler mode, which is going to save you just a ton of time, and because it is cross-platform, you can always have it running in the background, and you can also play basically whenever or wherever you want. You also absolutely don't need to spend any money on Raid. Some of the best endgame players are actually completely free to play, and there's a lot of creators out there with free to play only channels. With amazing graphics, tons of content, epic boss battles, millions of people playing the game, and it being completely free to play, I'd highly recommend trying out Raid using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen to get some insane bonuses that are only available through my link. This includes 500k silver, some energy, and even a chicken. Make sure to jump in today and find me under the nickname Nick2 and we can play together. Big thanks to Raid for sponsoring today's video. Alright, let's get into it real quick. I want to give full credit to Arcoed here. This boss version of the build is pretty much copy and pasted from him, so I'm just going to leave a link to his build planner down in the description. I'm going to quickly explain the build. I have a couple things slightly different, but it really isn't all that much. I'm going to assume that you know a lot of how Blizzard works before I really get into things. I'm only going to get into specific details with the build, and when it comes to the speedrun version of the build, I will also have a link to that, and I'll just briefly take a look at it, but I would highly recommend watching my previous Blizzard build if you don't know how the build functions, as I'm kind of just going to speedrun things here. So when it comes to the boss variation of the build, the main difference is that you just want to have your glacial aspect on a 2-hander, because having attack speed for killing bosses isn't all that relevant, and all the damage is from the glacial aspect. So once you have it on a 2-hander, it's going to do significantly more damage. This also frees up a slot on your amulet, so you can put something like Storm Swell, which is your second highest multiplier that you can possibly get. We don't need the Essu's Flame Legendary for attack speed when we're fighting bosses, because you can pre-place a lot of the blizzards, so we're just trying to pre-place blizzards so that the enemy spawns into it and then they die within the Godslayer Crown window. If you're fighting like 4-man Malphus, you would maybe want to swap Godslayer Crown out for something like Endariel's Visage for 15% increased damage with Tal Rasha, but in order to get these clips like I was getting on Uber Lilith, solo or 4-man if you wanted, or Uber Duriel or something, you want Godslayer Crown because you get that 60% damage multiplier all the time. You pair this with Fists of Fate so you can randomly get extremely lucky. On average, this is about 50% damage. I do believe, like mathematically overall, it's a little bit worse consistency-wise than just using a normal pair of gloves. I haven't actually sat here and done the math, It might not be because with a normal pair of gloves, you get like conceded. So that's 25% damage. So that's half of the value. The crit chance, though, is a lot of value because you have so much crit damage with this build. The attack speed isn't all that necessary. You do get the intelligence. It's probably about even, but if you want to get like insane juicy clips and hit for like 10 million per ice spike, the way that you do that is with Fist of Fate because you can get really lucky and get that 300% proc. But on average, Fist of Fate is about 50% increased damage. Outside of that, Ring of Starless Skies is just 40% damage all the time, which is crazy, has crit on it. Esu's Heirloom is very good because if you just spacebar, you get a whole bunch of crit chance, 33%, and we have a lot of crit damage multipliers. Tibalt's Will is just straight up damage, and then Raiment isn't going to help you much, it's just going to give you Ranks to Glass Cannon, and some Int, which is just straight up extra damage. When it comes to your skills and your enchants, Arcoed actually has a setup differently than I do. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. You can do some very, very tiny things to give yourself like a couple percentages of extra damage, but the way that I have it set up is kind of just for consistency. Honestly, though, you could literally play with 0 enchants and kill the bosses just as quickly. It's really just minor optimizations. I have Firebolt on because we have a lot of damage to burning and devouring blades and stuff. Arcoed in his clips is using Flame Shield to just apply burning to enemies. But if you're like in a 4-man and your build isn't perfectly set up, you don't want to have to rely on Flame Shield. And the only other thing that you could swap this to is Ice Blades enchant, and then pair this with Conjuration Mastery to just get a tiny bit of extra damage. You spawn like 1 or 2 Ice Blades, okay, you get 6% more damage. I just went for the more consistency. As you can see, I'm literally missing a skill. Like, it doesn't matter. The main thing that matters is that you want to have Unstable Currents active, because when Unstable Currents is active, you get a little bit of additional attack speed. And then you can also, by spamming your Blizzard and using the Chain Lightning enchant, you can spawn more Chain Lightnings, which will then spawn some Conjuration skills, being Lightning Spears, and then you get even more damage from Conjuration Mastery. That's the only benefit of this. I have Lightning Spear active, which Arcoed doesn't, because it does help with vulnerable consistency, because that is a problem sometimes. And when you have the Firebolt enchant, it's going to instantly apply burn, which Blizzard does not do via the Ice Spikes. The only other way to guarantee do that would be with Teleport. So basically, we just have Teleport here for protection, and also giving us Unstoppable for our Tibalt's Will, and Flame Shield is for the same thing there. And then the Lightning Spear is to apply Vulnerable more consistently and to apply Burning with Firebolt. But again, that could be an Ice Blade enchant for a tiny bit of increased damage. And the Chain Lightning will also apply the Burn and just spawn a little bit of Lightning Spears when we have Unstable Currents active. When it comes to the skill tree, 2 into Firebolt, 1 into Chain Lightning, you probably don't even need Enhance, whatever, but Devastation is cool for extra mana. Elemental Dominance doesn't increase our damage because Blizzard doesn't scale our damage. What scales our damage is the Ice Spikes, and scaling Ice Spikes overall damage. So Blizzard isn't doing any of our damage with the build, if you didn't already know that. Go into Teleport, just get the damage reduction. You don't even need this, honestly. You could just do whatever you want for this, the pure bossing setup, right? Flame Shield just got the mana cost reduction, which is helpful. Max out Glass Cannon. Elemental Attunement also isn't even necessary. If you wanted more like Frost Nova redundancy, or sorry, vulnerable redundancy, you could just go like this. I'll probably do something like this. But I was playing literally without a whole skill, and I'm just going to link Arcoed's planner so you guys can just kind of copy paste that. But this kind of just goes to show it really doesn't matter. You can play around with this stuff. You can literally take multiple skills off of your bar, and you're still going to absolutely nuke bosses. The lucky hit here, what is this even for? It's just for the lucky hit like mana thing, which you can run out of mana with this version of the build sometimes, but it's not that big of a deal. Mana shield, damage reduction, you honestly don't even need that either if you didn't want it. Does it even matter going into the skill tree at this point? I guess I'll just go over what's important. So having the duration on Blizzard increase is good. Having the Conjuration Mastery is good for the Lightning Spear spawning. And if you wanted to play Ice Blades, you could also manually just cast an Ice Blades for additional 3% damage there. Devouring Blaze is really good for the crit damage. And then getting Icy Touch, Frigid Breeze for some mana generation, and Permafrost. It does seem to count as a frost skill, so it does seem to work and scale off of these damage increases. And then Conduction is just because your Lightning Spear is going to crit, and then this is going to give you more movement speed, which will then give you more crit chance via Esu's, the boots. And then Esu's Ferocity does work for our Ice Spikes because this is still currently bugged, so you just get extra damage out of this. When it comes to the pet, you want Genesis, Duration, and Tactical for just 50% increased damage. And then you want Tempest with Resource Support to give you a little bit of extra mana, Breaking Support for vulnerable consistency, and Efficiency Support for extra crit chance. You could swap breaking support for burning support, but because I'm playing Firebolt enchant, I pretty much instantly proc the burning anyways. And I just like having more consistency with vulnerable, but honestly, it's consistent enough as it is. I already kind of went over the unique, so let's just go over the individual pieces. Again, on the helmet, you want Godslayer or Andariels, but if you want like instant kills on bosses like Duriel, you want to have a Godslayer on. Raiment is just for the ranks of glass cannon, the int, and the damage to close. Fist of Fate, or alternatively, you could just wear a pair of gloves with like conceded, int, attack speed, crit chance. Lucky hit chance doesn't really do anything. You could get like all stats. On the pants, you want Tibalt's Will and just try to get as high of a damage roll on this as possible. On the boots, you want Esu's Heirloom for the mana cost reduction, crit damage, and so that you get the extra crit chance, which is 33% after evading. On your two-hander, you want to have a staff. You want it to have intelligence, all stats, damage to close, and crit damage. Instead of crit damage, you could have damage to vulnerable, and then you want the ice spikes on here. For your rings, you want Talrasha and Ring of Starless. If you don't have Starless Skies, you could use Blue Rose. You could also use X-Falls. X-Falls will proc for a bit, but it's probably less damage overall. Blue Rose is really nice for the mana cost reduction. The lucky hit effect is pretty bad on it, though, but the mana cost reduction is pretty nice. You're probably just not going to get nearly as good of boss kills, though, without the Starless Skies, because it's just 40% damage and 40% resource cost reduction. The main difference that I have between Arkwood's Planner is just the amulet, and it's very slightly different. You want intelligence if you can get it, movement speed, mana cost reduction. The movement speed isn't entirely necessary because Esu's does gives you a maximum movement speed every time that you evade. So if you kill a boss within the 3 seconds, you'll have a movement speed cap. You don't really need movement speed on amulet, but having intelligence, I do believe, does give you a damage increase. Mana cost reduction is pretty much mandatory to be able to spam the blizzards enough. And outside of that, I have Glass Cannon, but ideally you would probably want Devouring Blaze. Glass Cannon, how much am I getting from it? 18% damage, so I think it's about equivalent. Actually, Glass Cannon is probably a little bit more on average, but Devouring Blaze is also very good. Alternatively, Permafrost would be almost as good as well. When it comes to the Paragon board, just check the link in the description. Again, I literally just copied this from Arcoed, so full credit to him. I just kind of wanted to showcase the build and also have an excuse to show you guys the speedrunning version of the build that I made. But basically for the glyphs, you just go Elementalist in the first board for the 15% increased damage and the buff to non-fizz. You go Destruction in this board, and you get some additive damage here, which ends up being pretty good. You get Unleash for, it's literally just like 6% increased damage. It's pretty weak, but you do buff non-physical damage, which is good. And then you go for Flame Feeder for just increased damage, get some more additive damage here. Go for a Stalagmite to increase the Ice Spike damage, and we get Frigid Fate, which has a pretty high multiplicative bonus because we got all the non-fizz damage buffed. And then we go into Exploit for just a multiplicative increase, and then into Icefall for another multiplicative increase and a bit of additive here. There's not a ton of glyphs that are worth going after when you're trying to literally just nuke bosses as much as possible. That was just the boss nuking version of the build, and I want to show you guys that because that's what I had on. Then when it comes to the speedrun version, this is very similar to the previous version of Blizzard that I posted. The main difference is that I'm using Teleport Enchant, which is my favorite way to play Sorcerer personally. It's a ton of fun just spamming Teleport over and over. It gives you a lot of survivability because everything is permanently stunned via Raiment. You always get a protection shield every time you're using a cooldown, and you're also getting permanent damage reduction by spamming the Teleport. But stunning everything instantly and just flying through the map is a ton of fun, and it feels very safe, even though technically you're losing a lot of survivability because you're wearing Raiment. And I put on Tibalt's for a little bit more damage there. But you're losing a defensive legendary, which in theory you'd think would make you feel a lot squishier, but for some reason I just feel so much safer playing this version of the build, and it's infinitely more fun. And I'll show you guys a run where I finished the T100 in like 2 minutes or something like that. The main difference between my previous version of the build, if you saw it, and this one is simply I go for Disobedience instead of Juggernaut on the helmet here, because Juggernaut doubles your evade cooldown. And you get armor on the helmet and the amulet, and that will nearly armor cap you. And then you go for Raiment for the stun, so you can spam your teleport. And then you want to get a Ghostwalker boots with ranks to teleport. You lose a little bit of damage not having Esus, but it's fine because you're able to spam your teleport this way. As long as you get boots with ranks, not ranks to teleport, attacks reduce evade cooldown, just like these pair, which is what I've been wearing. And you can also get movement speed after killing an elite. But Ghostwalker is very, very nice. Permanent 25% increased movement speed, and every time you teleport with your normal teleport, you will become unstoppable, and you can just run straight through enemies. That's pretty much the only difference between the speedrun version and the normal version of the build. Here I'm just going to show you guys some gameplay. As you can see, it is a crazy amount of fun. I'm not even like, Well, I'm trying to go as fast as I can, but I haven't like mapped it out and done a billion vaults. This gameplay is like a week old, and I just wanted to go in here and just see how fast I could do it with this version of the build. And it's a crazy amount of fun. I'd really recommend, if you're playing Sorcerer right now and you're playing Blizzard or thinking about it, highly, highly recommend playing this. Obviously, a lot of people are like, well, what's the point? You're just like flying through the map and everything is dying behind you. In vaults, you kind of want to just fly through the map and get to the end. This build isn't really going to be good for the gauntlet, probably, because I think in the gauntlet, you want to just kill stuff. But for vaults, particularly, you want to just get to the end as fast as possible. And Blizzard has this problem where it takes a second for the damage to start happening. But when you're just teleporting constantly, you can teleport, leave a blizzard, walk away. Teleport, leave a blizzard, walk away. And it ends up just being a really fun way to play the build. And it's definitely my favorite build this season. Arc Lash spamming teleport is also insanely good and probably the best thing if you're trying to just speedrun T100s or speedrun the Gauntlet. But if you want a overall versatile build, I would highly recommend playing the teleport version, and then anytime that you want to just go bosses, just have a two-hander to swap to just absolutely nuke the boss. You can kind of do like a hybrid between the teleport version of the build and the boss killing version, and very easily swap between the two to just have an overall most versatile build probably in the game for sorcerers. It was a pretty quick video. Hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe for videos similar to this one, and I will see you guys later. Again, big credit to Arcwood. Definitely check his channel out. Link to his channel will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.